In the heart of West Africa, an empire rose by the sword and fell by the sword. From armored cavalry thundering across the plains to arrows darkening the skies, the Oyo Empire forged its destiny in war. For 2 centuries, its armies humbled kingdoms, from the Nupe in the north to the Dahomey in the west. Its horsemen struck fear across Yoruba land, and its kings commanded tribute from the coast to the Niger. But glory has a price. Rebellions, betrayals, and foreign invasions would turn Oyo's strength into its downfall. From the fires of conquest to the ashes of collapse, this is the story of the empire whose rise and ruin was written on the battlefield. The Oyo Empire, which lasted from around 1600 to the 1830s, was one of the greatest Yoruba states in West Africa. Its power was built on war, and in the end, it was also destroyed by war. From the beginning, Oyo relied on strong armies, especially its feared cavalry, to conquer neighbors and control distant lands. The empire fought many battles against states like Nupe, Dahomey, Benin, Ashanti, and the Fulani. It also faced uprisings at home, such as the Egba Revolt and the rebellion in Ilorin. Every war shaped Oyo's rise or pushed it closer to its fall. This story explores those wars, the commanders who led them, the strategies used, and the consequences that followed. For Oyo, war was both the source of greatness and the cause of ruin. The Oyo army was well structured and advanced for its time. After the empire came back from exile in the early 1600s, the position of Are Ona Kakanfo was created. This was the supreme general of the empire. The Kakanfo lived on the frontier, away from the capital, so he could guard against enemies and not threaten the king directly. In war, he led the empire's armies and was expected never to return without victory. Afonja of Ilorin, who later rebelled, was one of the most famous Kakanfos. At home, the Bashorun, the prime minister and head of the Oyo Mesi Council, commanded the forces that defended the capital. This system balanced power and protected the king. Oyo's army had 3 main divisions: cavalry, infantry, and archers. Its biggest strength was the cavalry. Oyo borrowed horse riding tactics from its northern neighbors, especially after being defeated by the Nupe. By the 1600s, Oyo had trained horsemen, many of them armored and carrying spears, swords, and even poison-tipped lances. The infantry fought with bows, arrows, javelins, clubs, and axes. Poisoned arrows gave them an edge in battle. Large leather or cane shields were used for defense. Unlike some neighbors, Oyo did not rely on guns until much later. It was only in the 1800s that Oyo began to use firearms. For most of its peak years, Oyo expanded without the aid of firearms, relying instead on mobility, iron weapons, and fearsome cavalry charges. In battle, Oyo combined fast cavalry attacks with heavy rains of arrows from infantry. On the open savanna, Oyo horsemen were devastating, but in thick forests they struggled. Forests slowed horses and weakened their main advantage. Enemies like Dahomey learned to dig trenches, build walls, and fight from forests, forcing Oyo to rely on infantry or use sieges. The army was led by warrior chiefs called Eso, many of them nobles or governors. Vassal states also sent their own troops to support Oyo campaigns. This large, organized force allowed Oyo to fight long wars far from its homeland and dominate a vast territory for more than a century. Yoruba tradition says the Oyo kingdom was founded by Oranyan around the 14th or 15th century. By the late 1400s, Oyo had grown into a regional power, controlling many smaller states in the savannah north of Yoruba land. The first great disaster came in the mid-1500s. During the reign of Alaafin Onigbogi, Oyo went to war with the Nupe, Tapa. The Nupe, led by their king Soede, defeated Oyo. Around 1535, they invaded, captured Oyo Ile, the capital, and burned it down. The Alaafin and his people fled into exile in Borgu. For almost 80 years, the Nupe controlled Oyo's homeland. In the early 1600s, Oyo revived under Alaafin Ofinran. Learning from past defeat, the Oyo warriors returned with cavalry and iron armor, tactics borrowed from the Nupe. Ofinran defeated the Nupe and reclaimed Oyo land. A new capital was built at Oyo Igboho, while the old city became known as Old Oyo, Oyo Ile. Ofinran's successor, Egugwojo, pushed Oyo to expand across Yoruba land, conquering rival Yoruba towns like Ibadan, Ijesha, and Egba. Another ruler, Orompoto, launched campaigns to destroy the Nupe threat once and for all. Oyo then entered a period of peace under Alaafin Ajiboyede, who marked the stability with the first Bere festival, a great celebration of peace and prosperity. Oyo also tried to expand east toward the Benin Empire between 1578 and 1608, but this failed. The forests and hills of Ikiti made it impossible for cavalry to advance. Oyo captured some towns but could not reach Benin itself. Towns like Otunekiti stayed independent and served as a buffer between Oyo and Benin. After this, both empires respected their boundaries and avoided large wars with each other. To the west, Oyo's cavalry was more successful. By the late 1500s, Oyo forced many Aja and Ewe states, like Alada and Great Adra, to pay tribute. In one case, Oyo even intervened in Alada when its people complained about their king's cruelty. Oyo's show of force made neighboring states fear its power. By around 1600, Oyo controlled much of the coastal trade indirectly through these tributary states, giving it wealth and access to the Atlantic economy. This early period showed how Oyo rose from near destruction to become the strongest Yoruba state by adopting cavalry warfare and spreading its influence through battles and tribute. Oyo laid the foundation for the great empire it would soon become. After recovering from the Nupe Wars, Oyo began to expand aggressively in the 1600s and 1700s. Its cavalry allowed it to push further into the savannah and dominate neighboring peoples. Oyo strengthened its northern borders by fighting the Nupe and Bariba, Borgu. At first, Borgu had sheltered the Oyo royal family during their exile, and some Bariba even held offices in Oyo. But as Oyo grew powerful, it sought to control Borgu directly. Oyo armies captured towns like Ogodo and Jeba and pushed toward Busa. For much of the 1700s, Nupe and Borgu were kept in check, but later cracks appeared. In 1783, Alaafin Abiodun led a campaign into Borgu, but his army was crushed, losing the equivalent of 11 generals and their men. In 1789, another expedition against the Nupe also failed, costing Oyo 13 generals and their forces. These defeats weakened Oyo's northern frontiers and showed that its cavalry no longer held the same dominance. Oyo's longest and most famous wars were with the kingdom of Dahomey. In the early 1700s, Dahomey under King Agaja conquered Alada 1724 and Weda 1727. These were Oyo's tributary states and important coastal trade centers. This brought Dahomey into direct conflict with Oyo. In 1728, Oyo invaded Dahomey. Dahomey soldiers, armed with muskets, dug trenches and built stockades around their capital, Abomey. Gunfire frightened Oyo horses and the cavalry struggled. But after 4 days of fighting and reinforcements arriving, Oyo broke through, sacked Abomey, and forced Agaja to flee. Dahomey agreed to pay tribute. Still, Dahomey resisted. Between 1728 and 1748, Oyo invaded Dahomey several more times. In 1730, Agaja sent his son Tegbesu as a hostage to Oyo to restore peace, but he soon rebelled again. Finally, in 1748, Oyo launched a massive campaign burning Abomey and the nearby city of Kana. Tegbesu fled and later sued for peace, agreeing to pay even greater tribute. From 1748 until about 1818, Dahomey paid Oyo yearly in slaves, cloth, and goods. These wars gave Oyo control of the Egbado Corridor, the route linking Yoruba land to the Atlantic coast. Through it, Oyo dominated ports like Porto Novo and Badagry, making the empire rich from the slave trade. For 70 years, Dahomey stayed under Oyo's shadow. Oyo also clashed with the powerful Ashanti Empire. In 1764, Ashanti tried to expand eastward into what is now Togo. The Akiem and Akan state resisting Ashanti allied with Oyo and Dahomey. At Atakpame, the joint Oyo-Dahomey-Akiem force defeated the Ashanti army, forcing them to abandon expansion eastward. This battle fixed the boundary between Oyo and Ashanti spheres of influence. Oyo's role was key, and the victory strengthened its reputation as the most powerful military force in the region. Oyo also campaigned in the Mahi country, north of Dahomey, bringing the area under its influence. In 1784, Oyo showed naval power when it joined Dahomey and Lagos to blockade the coastal town of Badagry for disobedience. To the west, Oyo extended authority over Yoruba states like Sabe and Ketu. To the east, it fought the Ijesha, but the war ended in stalemate. Forest battles remained Oyo's weakness. By the late 1600s and throughout the 1700s, Oyo had become one of the largest empires in West Africa, covering about 150,000 square kilometers. Its wealth came from tribute, slaves, and trade. But its stability depended heavily on continued military success. Once defeats began piling up in the late 1700s, the empire's decline had already begun. In the mid-1700s, Oyo's biggest problem came from within. The Prime Minister, Bashorun Ga'a, used his power to dominate the empire. Between 1754 and 1774, he forced 4 Alaafins to commit suicide, each time presenting them with a calabash or parrot's eggs as a sign that the council had rejected their rule. During this time, Ga'a ruled from behind the scenes. His coups weakened respect for the throne and caused deep divisions among chiefs. Oyo's external campaign slowed, and vassal states saw that even the Alaafin could be overthrown. It was not until 1774, under Alaafin Abiodun, that Ga'a was captured and executed. But by then, Oyo's unity had already been damaged. Soon after, some subject peoples began to break free. The Egba, living in the forests around today's Abeokuta, had long resented the taxes and the harsh rule of Oyo's officials. Led by a war chief named Lisabi, they organized secretly and struck back between 1775 and 1780. In a surprise move, the Egba massacred Oyo's agents in their towns. When the Alaafin sent an army to punish them, Lisabi and his men ambushed the soldiers and defeated them. This victory ended Oyo's control over the Egba. By the early 1800s, the Egba had regrouped in Abeokuta, a fortress city that Oyo could no longer penetrate. The loss of the Egba weakened Oyo's hold on the Egbado corridor, the route to the coast. It was a major blow to Oyo's economy and showed other vassals that the empire was not invincible. The final blow of this period came with Alaafin Awole, son of Abiodun, in the 1790s. His reign was marked by poor decisions that angered his generals. First, he ordered the Are Ona Kakanfo Afonja to attack Iwere Ile, the hometown of Abiodun's mother. Tradition said any Kakanfo who attacked the town would meet a miserable death. Afonja refused. Later, in 1795, Awole commanded Afonja to attack Apomu, a market town belonging to the sacred city of Ile Ife. This was even worse because Alaafins had sworn never to fight against Ife, the spiritual home of the Yoruba. Afonja obeyed reluctantly and destroyed Apomu. When he returned, Afonja turned his army against Oyo Ile, demanding Awole's abdication. Facing rebellion and loss of support, Awole committed suicide around 1796. According to legend, he cursed the empire with his dying words. After his death, Oyo fell into chaos. For nearly 20 years, there was no stable Alaafin. Regional chiefs like Afonja in Ilorin, Adegun the Onikoyi, and Solagberu began ruling their own territories. Authority from the capital collapsed, and the empire was breaking apart from within. By the early 1800s, Oyo was already weak, and its northern outpost Ilorin became the center of rebellion. The Are Ona Kakanfo, Afonja, had made Ilorin his stronghold after Awole's death. To strengthen himself, he welcomed Muslim settlers and warriors, including the Fulani cleric Shehu Alimi. In 1817, Afonja openly declared Ilorin independent from Oyo. He was supported by Muslim cavalry and Fulani allies linked to the Sokoto jihad. Soon, Ilorin became both a Yoruba rebellion and part of the wider Islamic holy war sweeping northern Nigeria. For a while, Afonja remained leader, but in 1823, he was betrayed and killed by the Fulani. Shehu Alimi's son, Abdusalami, then took control and made Ilorin an emirate of the Sokoto Caliphate. A Yoruba town had now become a Fulani-ruled state. From Ilorin, the Fulani waged war against Oyo. By the mid-1820s, they were burning villages and seizing towns. The British explorer Hugh Clapperton, who visited in 1825, saw Oyo lands destroyed and noted that most of Oyo's cavalry had defected to Ilorin. The final disaster came in 1835 when Ilorin's army marched on Oyo Ile, the capital. They besieged it, overran it, and set it ablaze. The once great city was left in ruins. By 1836, the Oyo Empire had collapsed. Its northern provinces fell to Ilorin, while the south splintered into new powers like Ibadan, Ijaye, and Abeokuta. While Ilorin attacked from the north, Oyo also lost its hold in the west. In 1823, King Gezo of Dahomey stopped paying tribute and began raiding Oyo's allies. The Alaafin demanded even larger payments, but Gezo refused. Oyo sent its army to punish Dahomey, but this time, the tables turned. Dahomey's reorganized forces, armed with muskets and supported by the female warrior regiments, the Amazons, defeated Oyo. This ended over 70 years of Dahomey's vassalage. After this victory, Dahomey became independent, raided freely, and took control of trade routes that once enriched Oyo. After the fall of Old Oyo, survivors moved south and built a new capital, Agodoyo, around 1837. The next Alaafin, Atiba Atobatele, focused on survival. He allied with Ibadan and Ijaye, asking them to defend against Ilorin and Dahomey. But the great imperial system was gone. The collapse of Oyo opened the door to decades of wars among Yoruba states as each tried to fill the power vacuum. The empire that once stretched from the Niger to the coast now existed only as memory and legacy. From its rise to its fall, the story of the Oyo Empire was the story of war. Its success came from its powerful cavalry, iron weapons, and well-organized armies. With these, Oyo conquered neighbors, forced kingdoms like Dahomey to pay tribute, and became one of the most important states in West Africa. Through war, Oyo grew rich from trade, especially the slave trade, and spread its influence across Yoruba land and beyond. The Alaafin could command tens of thousands of soldiers at short notice, and the mere threat of Oyo's army kept many states in line. But war was also Oyo's undoing. Ambitious generals like Bashorun Ga'a and Afonja used the army for personal power, weakening the throne. Defeats against Borgu, Nupe, and later Dahomey and Ilorin exposed the empire's limits. Oyo also failed to adapt to new weapons quickly. While rivals gained firearms, Oyo's armies still relied mostly on spears, arrows, and cavalry. The cost was heavy. Thousands of warriors and generals were lost in single campaigns. Whole cities were destroyed, and populations were displaced. By the 1830s, the once united empire had split into smaller states, and the Fulani held the north. Yet Oyo's legacy lived on. New Yoruba cities like Ibadan, Abeokuta, and Ogbomoso rose from the chaos of its fall. The Alaafin of Oyo still remains a respected title today, a symbol of the empire's former greatness. The Oyo Empire showed the heights a state could reach through war and the dangers of depending too much on it. Its story remains one of the most important chapters in African history, a saga of glory, rebellion, and the price of empire built by the sword. The Oyo Empire rose with the thunder of horses and fell in the flames of war. It conquered kingdoms, it ruled nations, but in the end, it was undone by its own battles. Yet its spirit did not die. The memory of Oyo lives on in the Yoruba people, in their culture, their traditions, and their strength. This is not just history, it is the story of our ancestors. Subscribe now to History of Ancestors and walk with us through the forgotten empires of Africa. Subscribe to History of Ancestors. Watch out for our upcoming videos on war fought during the reign Oyo Empire.